Back with us again is Mrs. Henrietta Nkemba, the founder of Dwelling Places. So tell us, what are the different kinds of foster care? Let's start from the beginning. What is foster care? And what are the different types of foster care?
Well, foster care is a legal statement, actually. It means taking care of a child who is not your biological child. And the difference is that is supposed to be legal, like you're supposed to go through a legal process. There's a Children's Act, and there's a section in there that guides how you can, the procedures of how to actually get into formal foster care. So, but there's also informal foster care. We have that as a word, but it's not in the Children's Act. It's either supposed to be foster care or nothing. So, but most of the people who do, who carry out foster care in Uganda don't even know they are doing foster care. Because in our culture, you know, every child is everyone's child. So the legal foster care is unfortunately a word that exists in the books, like in the Children's Act, but for most of the times in Uganda, you can literally pick up a child and take them into your care and just be with the child, and nobody comes to you. A case in mind, for me, my husband and I really raised 18 children in our house under what anybody could call foster care. They are not our biological children. 8 of these children were children to a lady that I found on the streets many years ago. She was suffering from HIV, and somebody happened to tell her from that time that in Katwe, I had just placed people in Katwe, and somebody had told this lady who was staying in a kitchen somewhere that there's this lady called Rita. If you talk to her, she'll take your children. But by then, I was just that person who was doing anything, you know. I didn't know what to do, you know. So anyway, I found this lady, and she spoke to me. She was really sick. Anyway, to make the long story short, when we actually started our first children's home, I told this lady that, you know, if I take you off the streets and you come in and be the caretaker for all the children, the street children that I'd taken in, I'll take in all your children. Oh. So she was the first caretaker in the children's home. I know it sounds funny if anyone in government actually had me right now, and how I got a street person to come in and actually, but nobody cared. You know, I was with these children. The home grew to 90 children, and she was their caretaker, and she was sick to the bone. She was sick to the extent that we lost her in the home. She died in the home many years ago. And all her 7 children, 6 of them were her biological children, and 2 were her stepchildren. Yeah. But I had become so emotionally attached to her. And before she died, she had actually, I taught her how to do a will. And when she wrote her will, she had nothing to her apart from a piece of land where she would be buried and her children. And in her will, she left me as their caretaker. But I didn't know what that meant because I was running an organization. So I thought in her head was that she meant that she was leaving the children in the care of the organization. But legally, it meant that she was leaving the children in my care. So there was a time in the beginnings of my ministry, I was working with another organization, and somehow that organization split, and it ended up that these children now became in my direct care. So there was 8 of them, and I could not see myself splitting these children. So my poor husband, I spoke to him and I said, look, these children, this is what's going on. And well, that's what happened. So they came into my care, and those children had 2 friends who also came into my care. 2 friends who were sisters who came into my care. And before long, really, the long story short, there was 16 of them with my two, so they've grown up. And the last one just graduated this year.
Wow.
But the last one of them. And I thought I was done until 2015 when another one was brought into my care and she was 5. So I still have a foster care a child in foster care staying with me who is will be 10 on the 28th of February.
Oh.
But what I meant is that for those ones, the many of them, no one ever came to tell me take them on. No probation officer ever came. We just took them on, and eventually we knew that what we were doing was called foster care. Yeah. So I know I'm not the only one, and I know there are probably many Ugandans in that situation. So if you say separate the difference between legal foster care and informal foster care, no one will come to you and tell you, why are you having these children, until you do something wrong. For sure. But just so the children, after, when the children are 18 years, they have a right to say, legally, they have a right to say, well, now thank you for your help, and now I'm going to start my own way. Yeah. That is in legal foster care. Yeah. But otherwise, there's nothing, there's no two differences, that there's foster care and there are no different types of foster care. Okay. Under the Children's Act, it's just called foster care, and it means taking care of a child who is not your biological child, but the child would have been placed there by what they call a care order, given by court through the probation officer. So my 10-year-old was placed with me from the government legally. Yes.
Okay. Can you help us understand the difference between fostering and adoption?
Yeah. Now, in foster care, as I said, that you are not, in both cases, you are not biological parents. Yes. And in the one case, the child is placed with you in what they call a care order, and it has a timeline. Mm-hmm. The minimum time that you can stay with a child in foster care is 3 years. Okay. And the maximum is 18. But every 3 years, you're supposed to kind of renew that. Mm-hmm. So if they place with a child, there's an age as well, like you cannot foster or adopt a child until you're 25. As an adult, you must be at least 25. Okay. And the child is, you must be at least 25 years old to adopt a child. I think there are also some rules about the sex, like what if you're a single woman, you can't foster adopting a male who is a certain age, There are those nitty-gritties that go in. But going back to the point is that in adoption, in foster care, the child can be taken away from you. After 3 years, you're supposed to renew and do all those things. Yes. But in adoption, yes. In adoption, the child will be your child as a biological child, and you have the same rights. Now, I want to be very clear on that, because when it comes to the children may not know that. If a child comes into your care and is in foster care, he attaches to you and is your child. Yes. So you take care of them, and they don't care about how long the government placed them there or what. In adoption, from the side of the children, in adoption, the child will be your child like any biological child, and you are expected to put them in your will. And the government will defend them if you don't put them in your will. But a foster child, this is very important for the listeners. A foster child is not very protected. If, for example, you pass away and you did not put them in your will, the relatives can say, thank you very much, you can go back. You are not anywhere in the will. So if people who attach with children who in foster care don't take the time to care for those foster children, they can end up being nowhere. They will, and yet in an adoption case, they must be taken care of. you know, in the will, and they can be contested in
the courts of
in
law.
the courts of law. You know, so one needs to know that in a biological situation, nobody will take. I mean, in an adoption situation, no one will take that child away from you. You can't take them back. But in a foster care situation, actually, if I have seen cases of children who have been taken, you know, a parent is very emotional, is wanting to say, oh, wow, I want to do something for children. So you place the child in foster care with them. The child is stealing. The child is doing, I say, take them back into the home. So that is a disadvantage on the side of the child. You know, like, it's not a permanent situation, and nobody will come to you and say, well, how come you? They'll just talk about you, but you will move on with your life. But in this case, if it's a biological child, even the siblings or the children that were born, your
In
own
that
children,
home.
it's a must that they acknowledge that this
That
one
is a
is a sibling as well.
No jokes.
So that is very important.
That clears a lot of. So I wanted to understand what is because you've spoken about a legal and an informal foster care placement kind of arrangement. So for the legal one, what is the actual legal process?
The legal process is that a child, for example, will be placed into anyone's home. Let me take an example of. Let me use the example of dwelling places, because we are an approved children's home, and our vision is to see that every child, we say that we want to see every child find a chest to rest his head on and a place to call home. So we aim to make sure that each and every child who comes into our care will eventually be placed in a home, in a home environment where there is probably a mom and dad or whatever, but like that, what you would define as a family structure, not an institution. So everything that we do, that's why we are saying that we've cared for 1,600 children. But in the home right now, as we speak, I think there are not more than 30 children. And yet many have come through the program. So you'll find that all the others that are not in the home right now are in a home somewhere. So for some it might be biological. For some, it might be foster placement. And for some, it's actually been a sibling, an older child who is taken care of. And for some, actually, it's children who have had, it's not foster, but like children who have had children. So it's like, they've grown up in the home, but kind of place them like that. We always aim that every child must be within a family, a home. And so when it happens, like when a child comes into dwelling places is supposed to go to the family court to get what they call a care order. Now a care order is given to every child while they're in the approved home. Now a parent or a potential foster care will come in and say, I want to support dwelling places and take a child who needs a family. So the social worker will look and say, no, this child's parent has been seen and therefore is going to be placed back in their family. But we have this specific one who doesn't have anywhere to go. So the first thing that we usually do in dwelling places is intentionally to look for foster carers. So when we look for foster carers, especially towards Christmas. We want every child to be somewhere in a home, somewhere for the whole Christmas season. So we really are very active in advocating to see that a child will not stay in an institution. Everybody will go. We literally close the home. Even the staff leave. Like every child must have at least an opportunity to stay in a home environment. So many times that the parents who have taken on these children on Christmas, for Christmas, love the children, and they are saying, oh, my kids have loved him and we would like to continue. So what Dwelling Places does is that we then support, we take the burden of, unless the parent says, no, it's okay, don't give me the money, but we take the school fees burden off the parent. So we remain with that kind of control in some kind of way. And also in the same scenario, in foster care, there is a control somewhere. It would be the probation officer who would be in charge of that in the legal sense. So the child will come from the home, and the care order will be transferred to the parent. And so, but there is always a responsibility that the probation officer, who does the placement is the probation officer under the Ministry of Gender, who places the child in the home. So they come in and visit the home. They see, do you have a place for the child to sleep? Do you have, so that is not an extra burden. Yes. So they approve. They write a report to the court, and the court will give a care order that will come in, and the child is placed with you. But every now and then, the social worker or the probation officer is supposed to come and check on the child in the home and see whether the child is safe, comfortable. Sometimes the child is taken away and they is spoken to one-on-one, privately. If there are things that happen that show that the child is not comfortable, the social worker or in dwelling places, in this case, in informal foster care, the child is withdrawn and placed back in the home. And we've had several of those. Placed back in the home until the next potential foster carer comes in. So that is basically the process of foster care. The legal process, there is a care order that has got to be given, and secondly, there is supposed to be a visitation in the home all the time.
What would you say are the challenges? I think you hinted on one, especially for the child, the uncertainty that anything can happen and the child will be taken away. Are there any other challenges for both the parents and the child?
One of the challenges that I often don't hear being verbalized, that is very important, that foster parents should be aware of, and also the public can be aware of. And is that children who are in care anywhere, whether they are adopted children or fostered children, in whatever way, not staying with their biological parents, there is a thing called a disease called entitlement.
Oh.
Yeah.
We know it well.
I see.
We've heard of it. As they're growing, yes.
A disease called entitlement. It's a huge challenge. And why I'm saying that is that it's very hard to balance that, because as a parent, a foster parent, you come up and you want to do your best for the children who are placed in your care. Discrimination, you do your best. But from the mind of the child, they're saying, well, you must do that because, of course, I'm your child. You're supposed to do that. Yeah, so you chose me, and therefore, you must do what? Well, that's a very good question. Yeah. That's a very good question. You can do your best. Yeah? But believe me, there are times, especially, when you cannot do more. This is where I'm coming. At the age of 18, when a child's gone, when the child is grown up, and it's time for them to basically be independent. In my house, I've always said it to every child who has been in my care. And this is my youngest one is the first one I've brought in when she's very young. The others have come in when they were like 10, 12, 1. Most of them have been. But what I've always told them is that at the age of 18, or when you finish uni, you're going independent. Whoa. That's always been a challenge.
Is it really?
Big challenge. There are tears. Why? Why do I have to go? Yeah. And it's the same scenario in a children's home. I'm sure if anyone went and asked Watoto what they do with the children who have grown up, leaving the nest in that environment, like when they become adults, you've done your best. You've done your best. You have 18 children that you've raised in Watoto case, or in Watoto also brings in children who for a long time, they stay for long. But you've done your best with a child, and it's time to go. But most times people leave with all sorts of things.
Yes. I know I've experienced it.
Yes.
Yes. Like
well,
and because your own biological kids, when it's time to go, if anything, they want to be looking forward because they always know I can come back.
Yes.
That is where it comes. That's where the comeback situation is. It's like when you come back, like the expectations that you place on every child is that they continue to be huge expectations. You know, though the dependency continues to be huge, and yet at the end, when children have become adults, there are other relatives that come into the picture. You know, let me give you a scenario. You've grown up, become an adult, you've been in a home, and it's time to get married. In our tradition, you're supposed to bring in the, for introduction and what. So some people will say, why should I come and be at your introduction? That one's not my child. But when the time comes for whoever is your biological child, I'll show up. But do you blame them? Or don't you blame them? This is what I'm saying. Those are challenges. When the time comes and the family portrait is going to be taken.
Now you've taken things.
When the family portrait is going to be taken and the grandparents have come in and the family portrait is going to be taken. So they're saying, oh, this family is coming in and that family is coming. Now it's time for the siblings to come and be around and everybody to come in around the grandparents. And they're like, hang on, these ones are not.
Oh, no.
It always happens.
And sometimes they even do times two, so they do the ones with them, then they remove them, then they do the original copy. So it's still being filled.
No. There's a difference between adopted
and foster. Adopted, we finished adopted. That one is
adopted children. It's most times, and it's so funny because like people who are doing adoptions, they would rather take babies.
Yeah.
So that way, the grandfather or the everybody has accepted from a young age, whether you like, and you can fight it and say, look, this is my child. Whether you like it or not, this one is my child. Yes. But when it comes to foster care, remember, there are other control environments that are there.
Now when you say that,
makes sense. The control environments are that the social workers will come in and always interrupt the process, and there are things you can't do. Like right now, if I wanted to travel abroad, sometimes I travel with my children, but I can't take my foster child. Why? Because I need permission from the probation officer.
So imagine how she feels.
You see what I mean? So sometimes when I'm traveling, I say, oh, I'm going to leave my child with my brother. So, but my little child will come and say, Mom, even me one day I'm playing. The way she talks, like she's like, I want to fly in the aeroplane. I want to do whatever. And maybe sometimes the finances may be there, but the issue is that I can't just up and take it. So when I write, get your passport, what will I write in your passport? What what I mean? All those things. There are other things that are there.
But you explain to her, so she
I do explain to her. She's still young that it may not be. Yes. It may not be that whatever. But when you're older, and the time comes in this situation where you have Kwanjula, yes. So that the foster child expects that that definitely your parents are my parents. Yes. So definitely the Senga should be your sister. But she's like, the sister is saying,
that's not our child.
I'm not a Senga. Yeah.
It's like not that those ladies you have to.
In that situation, well, basically these are the challenges I'm saying that you face, and these go from one place to another. And sometimes the foster child might just decide, you know what, I'm just going to have a small wedding, a small whatever, but you don't know why all those things happen. There are scenarios where I had a foster child who actually came in and were going to get married, and the father is known and was in the picture, and the mom was, but the foster parent had never had never met the biological parents at all. So, but there was an effort to try and say, oh, maybe this is a great thing that's happening to you. Please invite your father. So let your husband know, like when they are preparing the gomesi and they prepare for you.
Something for you.
For your biological ones.
For your biological ones. But they didn't show up.
The biological?
They didn't. Now you're the Mugole. You have sent a message, they've took to you, but for some reason, what I know is that the biological father was saying, I've not been in the life of this child for a long time. It was maybe embarrassment, maybe shame, you don't know. But you have a Mugole who is so upset in this whole situation. And then at some point, there's that kind of rejection saying, okay, I could have been with the father, but why didn't? There are always questions in there that happen, you know. But like I'm saying, with the issue of foster placement is good for every child to have a place that they can call home. But it's a challenge on many fronts. On the front that even now, for example, for me, most of my children, it was informal foster care. But most of the children that have now named themselves the Nkembas, you know, they did not get any formal whatever, and they are grown-ups now. So whether I like it or not, I can't say, now you're 25, but now I can actually try and put you and make you. Actually, what I told them recently, my children, I told them, you know, those days we had the privilege to choose you, to come and be raised in our family and be here. But now that you're grown up, it's your turn to choose us. To choose us. You can choose us. It's up to you. For now, what I can tell you is that for your grandchildren, because now we have 10 grandchildren between them. Yeah. And every Christmas, I have 1 week that I call the GCW, just to hype it up, Grandchildren's Week. So for 1 week they come and just have fun and you know. So I told them, look, for any of you, I know you were raised here, but your story does not have to be retold to your children. This is where I came from. This is where it doesn't have to be retold because we are here. They know us. Your children know us. But you have a choice to choose us. You can choose us. This can always be your home, but we will not be offended if you just say, oh, thank you for what you did. Now let me start my own. I will not be offended. I will not be offended in any way. And if you don't want your children to be us to be your grandchildren, it's not an issue. Don't feel free to just start a new life and be okay. It's not a send off. It's not saying go away, we don't need you anymore. This home is here. But that is now the difference between foster care and adoption. For adoption, it's a given. But for foster care, it will always be that after 18 you can choose if this parent can continue to be your go-to person.
And unfortunately, the show has to come to an end. The thing about all of this is parenting is a choice. And if you're like the Nkembas who have the opportunity to tell the children that now is your turn to choose us, we hope and pray that you can be able to do that. If you'd like any more information on fostering or adopting children, we'll be leaving a link below so that you can be able to see how you can change the life of a child and give them, like they say in dwelling places, a chest for them to lay their heads and a place to call home. Looking forward to hearing from you on all of your stories about the people you were raised with at home that were not necessarily your biological sisters or brothers. Tell us more so that we can be a part of this entire conversation. Until next time, with love from Bump Love.